Hey guys, welcome back to Buzzer2Buzzer. Alright guys, so over the past 2 weeks, we have seen a bunch of NBA developments going down. We've talked about a bunch of them on our live stream last Thursday as well. But guys, we still have to talk about the obvious. That, of course, concerning the team in the East, the Brooklyn Nets, who it seems like they took the saying, the rich can get richer, quite literally. Guys, the Brooklyn Nets we all saw about a week and a half ago, adding Blake Griffin to their squad. The man coming from Lob City, Blake Griffin, coming and joining the Brooklyn Nets. We saw him get his first dunk in like a year and a half, playing out with the Nets. And now, this past weekend, we find out the news that the center for the Spurs, LaMarcus Aldridge, also receiving a buyout from the San Antonio Spurs, coming himself to the Brooklyn Nets. Now, guys, these are two big stars who we all know in their prime were quite the deal. But now, sure, their primes have elapsed. They're still coming to the Brooklyn Nets, where, mind you not, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden. It seems like the squad is keep on adding big-name players. With where is the money even coming from? Our thoughts on LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin, and the whole situation unfolding with the Nets.
I'm getting flashbacks here, going back to the Golden State Warriors 2014, 2015, 2016. That 4-year span of when they were like absolutely unstoppable. I thought that in this decade, I think the Warriors were the most dominant team in this decade for sure, or the past decade. And now I think the Nets are going to rule this decade so far. I can't call for sure. Obviously, things can change a lot. NBA injuries obviously can affect players and teams a lot in different ways. But, the Nets roster right now is absolutely stacked in every position. I mean, we really thought it couldn't get any better, and they keep getting even better players. Sure, like you said, around LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin aren't in their primes, but it doesn't really matter when you have James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant to support them. So then I think the Nets right now are clearly the favorites, but I think they should definitely win this year.
On paper, this is a good move. Putting another rim protector, and not only a rim protector, but someone who can go get you buckets in crucial time. Now they're going to have potentially 5 guys on the floor who have been all-stars, which is, crazy to me that one team could have this many all-stars. But again, on paper, this is a good move, but I just think I go back to the chemistry issue. KD hasn't played in a long time. Kyrie's always in and out. The only player on the Nets who's been consistent is James Harden. And so adding Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge, I think the big question is, do they have enough time before the playoffs start to get their chemistry issues worked out, before they have to play the big matchups?
I personally think, going back to the Golden State Warriors, that any of those 3-4 Golden State Warriors teams would take the Nets team in 5 games easily. But moving past that, like Blake Griffin said in an interview 2 nights ago or last night, they spent the past 2 years calling him trash, and now they're thinking of a super team. I mean, there was a super team with them 3, but Blake Griffin doesn't really add much. Neither does LaMarcus Aldridge. They're both very washed. They're basically role players. Like Joe Harris is more important to that Nets team than either of those players are. But moving past that, the NBA is boring now. There's 2 teams, the Lakers and the Nets. If you're not a fan of either one of those teams, there's no point in watching basketball. And I think it's time for the NBA to convert to a hard cap league. I think it's very long overdue. It completely destroys parity. NFL leads the country in viewership, and it has for the past 10 years because of the parity it creates. Every year there's a new team. There's teams like the Seahawks that will 1 year be at the top of the division, or like 3-4 years ago weren't even a playoff team. Like the Bears, 3-13, 5 years back. Then 2 years after that, they were the third seed in the NFC. Now they're back to being an average team. There's so much parity that it creates. And even Patrick Mahomes, having the best quarterback in the league doesn't guarantee a Super Bowl. Unlike having like 2 players like LeBron James or Kevin Durant on the same team would. And so I think it's time for them to move forward, create a hard cap, and maybe actually make the NBA interesting again.
Harsh, you bring up a lot of good points. And, when I seeing these moves unfold over the past couple of weeks, I think one thing only. All this to be a man named LeBron James. Besides that, it's crazy. It's sort of, sure, at the end of the day, we'll be like, oh my gosh, they're adding Blake Griffin, LaMarcus Aldridge, but like you brought up, these guys are well past their prime. Blake Griffin, guys, we all know. Lob City, what could have been with Doc Rivers, CP3, DeAndre Jordan. Those 3 were for real, but they always failed to elapse deep in the playoffs. We know what happened in the Western Conference Finals, ultimately leading to last year's Doc Rivers leaving the team as well and being fired. Now, if we think about LaMarcus Aldridge, he used to be a baller. He was sort of that move for San Antonio from Tim Duncan, Mr. Fundamentals, now bringing in the new spotlight for LaMarcus Aldridge. But obviously, we saw him never really develop that whole game like Mr. Fundamentals himself. He never had that chance to. And that's why I feel like LaMarcus Aldridge, he sort of fell off and never had that top potential, which he could have once reached. Now, these guys still coming in. I think it's a huge bonus. You got two big-name guys who for sure got room to play out. LaMarcus Aldridge is like 34, 35 years old. Blake Griffin's still somewhat young. His game's evolved to more out of the perimeter as the NBA's changed as well. I'm so excited to see. But one thing for certain, harsh like you mentioned, it's weird seeing the NBA becoming so consolidated. Last year, I think we can all agree, was one of the best seasons we could have seen.
Last year was horrible too. There was like 4 teams. Last year was not good.
Much more spaced out.
We have not had a good year of
basketball
since LeBron was on the Miami Heat. Like, even the LeBron James Warriors year, sure, you can give that one. Maybe there's OKC, but that was the last good year of basketball. Since then, there's 4 teams at the top of the league, and everyone knows nobody's touching those 4 teams.
You're right, and it has to do with people being the cap. I mean, the NBA team is crazy how easily you sign a veteran minimum. Oh, Blake Griffin's on. Hey, yo, give me the veteran minimum. LaMarcus, give me the veteran minimum. These guys, collectively, I was reading a stat this morning. They lost out collectively on $20 million. Why? So that they could have a ring fitted on their fingers for them by KD, James Harden, Kyrie. So I think there's for sure a personality shift, a mentality shift, which has to happen in the NBA because, like Archie just said, it's becoming 2 teams, LA and the Nets. I think all 4 of us right here can agree that if a finals were to happen, it's most probable those 2 teams. But what are our thoughts? What are we thinking about this? Is the NBA heading into a wrong direction, which could honestly make the league even less viewership for the years to come?
I mean, just by looking at what the NFL does, I think, I was reading this the other day too. Out of the 50 most watched programs in the NFL, in America as a whole, 48 of them were NFL games, which shows you exactly what you need to know. I mean, people are interested. You don't know what's going to happen. Like we said, I think most people, if they had money to bet, you could probably bet that the Lakers and Nets are going to be in the finals, and one of those teams are obviously going to win. I don't see any other team, maybe the Clippers a bit, but other than that, no other team is going to be competing for a championship. And others just theater. It's a waste of time. And so, yeah, I think hopefully they add a hard cap soon, but otherwise, one team just gets 2 all-stars, and then people just go join that team, and it's pretty much over from there.
Adding on to that, last year's Seahawks-Vikings game had more viewers than any single game of the NBA Finals last year. Any single NBA game has had this year too. And adding on to that, with the decline in viewership in NBA games, in the next 10 years, they're on path to have less viewers than the MLB. And we all know nobody watches the MLB right now. It's a long season. And so for the NBA to fall that low should be a sign to Adam Silver to change something.
Also, forgetting the hard cap space and things like that, I think it's kind of unfair to compare the NBA and NFL in terms of viewership because just how it's structured in the rules. Obviously, with what Arden said, with the NFL, it's super unpredictable, right? It can go either way. That's because of how the playoffs are structured. It's one and done. But with the NBA, it's 7 games, right? Usually the favorites win. So people are just getting bored of watching the OP teams that we're talking about, the Nets, Lakers, win these rings. And, it's always expected. They don't get like a thrill. There's no surprise. There's no shock element in it. So I think that's why the viewership is keep on going down. Obviously, with these even more stacked teams, it's going to continue to go down, and they got to do something to change that.
And, I think for sure we can attest one thing, and that's looking back a decade. If you look in the 2010 era, you're looking at players, right? KD a couple nights ago said, man, wherever, I think it was replied on Twitter to a fan. He was like, man, wherever I go, I can't be alone. And he's somewhat right. I think it's changed in the players' mentality where instead of trying to compete with one another, they're looking to join one another. And, it's sort of that thing where you're not like, if you look at 2010, you're not seeing Kobe. You're not going to see Laker and Kobe Bryant. You're not going to see Dirk and Nowitzki go join a different team and link up to win a chip. It was people competing with one another to make a move. And I think we saw last 2 years ago when Kawhi Leonard made the move. Guys, we all know Kawhi could have gone to the Lakers, joined LeBron and Anthony Davis, and that would have been league shut out. You're telling me somebody's going to beat that team? No way. But Kawhi Leonard, Ari, I like to clown on him a lot, but got to give him credit where credit's due. He made a choice to go to the Clippers, and that's a bold move. He's saying instead of me joining LeBron James where I'm guaranteed a ring, I'm going to compete against him. And that takes guts. In today's NBA, seeing all these players joining hyper super teams, at this point, it's become who can make the biggest super team. And the NBA is changing. Hopefully.
And there's no problem with superstars teaming up. It's the problem that there's no limit on how many superstars you can put in teams. You know, they have the soft cap, but then teams like in big markets that can afford it, like the LA teams, the Miami teams, the Orlando teams back in the day, right? The New York teams and the Bulls, obviously they had the opportunity to get LeBron James and Dwayne Wade with Derrick Rose. So it's these big market teams end up dominating. The same problems in the MLB. The big market teams continue to dominate because they can afford the luxury tax. We don't see teams like Memphis being competitive at all. We don't see teams like yeah. We don't see teams like that, you know, being able to compete with these large market teams because they don't have the money. And so adding a hard cap actually makes these games competitive and the league overall competitive.
For sure. A lot of great points we discussed and a lot of things for NBA Board of Governors to think about as the upcoming years come with new players coming into the league as well. But one of the things for certain, cannot take away any credit from the man running the organization of the Nets. Sean Marks, guys, he turned the organization around. We remember a couple years back, the D'Angelo Russell, the players they had, turning a couple of draft picks to what the organization has become today. Quite remarkable, but seeing what's going down with the players, that's something which must change. Alrighty, guys, well, those are our thoughts on LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin, and a good discussion talking about the future of the NBA with the star-studded league. As always, guys, be sure to like button, subscribe, and comment down below your thoughts on the moves the Nets are making and the whole landscape of the NBA becoming what it is today. Guys, take care. Catch you guys on the next one.